I welcome you to my channel. Subscribe and listen to my new stories every day. They say the cracks in a marriage often appear in the little things, the way a smile fades too quickly, the subtle shift in tone during casual conversation, or the way someone's gaze lingers on their phone a bit too long. I hadn't noticed those cracks in my marriage until it was too late. Lisa and I had been married for 12 years. She was everything I thought I needed, a sharp, ambitious woman with a wit that could cut through the heaviest of silences. She was also stunning, the kind of woman who turned heads at a party, leaving me feeling lucky and proud. Together, we were the couple everyone envied, the small business owner and the marketing executive, living the suburban dream. Or so I thought. Looking back, the warning signs were there. Late nights at the office turned into weekends away for client meetings. Text messages during dinner were brushed off with a distracted smile and a quick excuse. At first, I told myself it was just the stress of her demanding career. But one night, I noticed something that shook me to my core. It was a Thursday. Lisa was in the shower, her phone abandoned on the bedside table, the screen glowing faintly in the dimly lit room. I glanced at it, my eyes drawn to the notification like a moth to a flame. It was a message from someone named Nick from accounting. Innocent enough, right? But the words weren't innocent. Last night was amazing. Can't wait for round 2. My heart thudded in my chest, each beat a drum of disbelief. I read the message again, hoping I'd misunderstood, but the words didn't change. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Who the hell was Nick? And what exactly had been amazing last night? The sound of running water stopped abruptly, pulling me from my thoughts. I panicked and placed the phone back on the table, retreating to the living room. I sank into the couch, gripping the armrest like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. When Lisa joined me a few minutes later, she was all smiles, her hair wrapped in a towel. "What are you watching?" she asked, sliding onto the couch beside me. I mumbled something incoherent, avoiding her eyes. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she didn't care. Either way, I knew I couldn't confront her, not yet. Not without proof. And so, the investigation began. The next few days were a blur of stolen moments and covert searches. I combed through her emails when she wasn't looking, scanned her call logs, and even rummaged through her purse when she was in the shower. Each discovery felt like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. There were hotel receipts from weekends she'd supposedly spent with her girlfriends, restaurant charges in cities she claimed to have visited for work, and countless messages from Nick. But the messages were what gutted me the most. They weren't just flirtatious, they were intimate. Inside jokes, shared memories, plans for future rendezvous. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was building a life with this man, a life that didn't include me. The final straw came 2 weeks later. Lisa was heading out for another work trip, this time to Chicago. As she kissed me goodbye, I couldn't bring myself to say, "I love you." Instead, I nodded, watching her walk out the door with her suitcase in tow. The moment her car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my keys and followed. The hotel was a mid-range chain, nothing too flashy. I parked across the street and watched as Lisa entered the lobby, suitcase rolling behind her. A few minutes later, a man joined her, a tall, broad-shouldered guy in his late 30s, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and dark jeans. They hugged, and she kissed him. Not the kind of kiss you give a coworker. Not the kind of kiss you give someone when you're married. I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I wanted to march in there, demand an explanation, maybe even knock the guy out. But I didn't. Instead, I drove home, my mind spinning with plans. Confrontation wasn't enough. I needed her to feel the weight of what she'd done, the weight of what she was throwing away. The first stage of my plan was simple: gather more evidence. I spent the next week collecting everything I could, screenshots of her messages, copies of her hotel bookings, even surveillance footage from the hotel lobby. "Thank you," generous concierge. By the time Lisa returned from Chicago, I had enough to bury her. But I wasn't just planning to confront her. That would be too easy. Too predictable. Lisa had spent months, maybe years, deceiving me, playing me for a fool. She'd built a house of lies, and I was going to burn it to the ground. All I needed was the right moment. And that moment was coming. The days following Lisa's return from Chicago were a masterclass in restraint. Every time she smiled at me, kissed my cheek, or asked how my day was, it felt like a slap in the face. I wanted to scream, to throw the evidence at her feet and watch her scramble for excuses. But I knew better. A confrontation was satisfying, but revenge? Revenge was a dish best served cold, and I was about to serve it on ice. I spent my days meticulously planning my next move. Lisa's corporate gala was approaching, a lavish event she'd spent months organizing. It was her crowning achievement, the culmination of her hard work, and an opportunity for her to shine in front of her colleagues. More importantly, it was the perfect stage for what I had in mind. The first step was securing the perfect accomplice, her assistant, Julia. I'd always been cordial with Julia, and over the years, I'd helped her with little favors, fixing her laptop, giving her career advice. It wasn't difficult to win her trust. A casual coffee meeting turned into an opportunity to share my suspicions. I didn't reveal everything, just enough to make her wary of Lisa's integrity. "Do you ever feel like there's something off about Lisa?" I asked as we sipped our drinks. Julia hesitated, then nodded. "I mean, she's great at her job, but sometimes. I don't know. She can be a little secretive." I leaned in, lowering my voice. "I think she's hiding something big, Julia. I can't go into details yet, but if you notice anything strange, will you let me know?" She agreed, and just like that, I had someone on the inside. Over the next few weeks, Julia became my eyes and ears at Lisa's office. She fed me small details, a hushed phone call, a suspicious lunch break, a hotel booking for work travel that didn't align with any meetings on Lisa's calendar. Each piece of information was another thread in the tapestry of Lisa's betrayal. The second step was technology. I installed a GPS tracker on her car, hidden beneath the rear bumper, and linked it to an app on my phone. It wasn't just about knowing where she was, it was about knowing when she wasn't where she claimed to be. The tracker confirmed what I already suspected: her late nights at the office often ended at a quiet suburban house, Nick's house. My stomach churned every time I saw her car parked there, but it only fueled my resolve. Then came the piece de resistance, the slideshow. It was simple, elegant, and devastating. I compiled photos, screenshots of texts, and snippets of emails into a PowerPoint presentation. Each slide told a story: the kiss in the hotel lobby, the late-night texts, the dinner dates. It was a narrative of deceit, told in vivid detail. And it would play at the gala, right after her big speech. The night of the event arrived. Lisa was radiant, dressed in a sleek black gown that hugged her curves and drew every eye in the room. She was the picture of confidence, gliding from guest to guest with a glass of champagne in hand. I played my role to perfection, staying at her side, smiling, and chatting with her colleagues. If anyone noticed the tension in my jaw or the tightness of my smile, they didn't comment. The ballroom was packed, the air buzzing with excitement. Dinner was served, toasts were made, and finally, it was time for Lisa's speech. She took the stage to thunderous applause, her smile bright and her voice steady as she began to speak. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said, her tone warm and genuine. "This event is a celebration of our hard work, our achievements, and the bright future ahead." The audience hung on her every word, captivated by her charisma. I slipped to the back of the room, positioning myself near the AV booth. The technician looked up as I approached, and I handed him a USB drive. "This is the updated slideshow for Lisa's presentation," I said smoothly. She asked me to bring it over. He didn't question it, simply nodded and inserted the drive. My heart pounded as the screen behind Lisa flickered to life, displaying the first slide of my masterpiece. At first, the audience didn't react. The screen showed a seemingly innocent photo of Lisa in a hotel lobby, her back to the camera. But as the slides progressed, her embracing Nick, the intimate texts, the dinner dates, the room grew deathly silent. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, then gasps. Someone let out a low whistle. Lisa faltered on stage, turning to see what had captured everyone's attention. When her eyes landed on the screen, her expression shifted from confusion to horror. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The microphone slipped from her hand, clattering onto the stage. I stepped forward, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my tone calm but firm. "I think that's enough of Lisa's presentation." The room erupted into chaos. Lisa stumbled off the stage, her face pale and her hands trembling. She reached for me, her voice a frantic whisper. "Jack, please." I stepped back, holding up my hand. "Don't. Just don't." I left the room, the sound of her pleas trailing behind me. Outside, the cool night air hit my face, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. I'd been played for a fool, but not anymore. Lisa had built her house of lies, and tonight, I'd burned it to the ground. The chaos of the gala followed me into the night. As I walked away from the ballroom, the cool air cutting against my skin, I could hear the rising murmur of voices behind me, disbelief, gossip, anger. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. The damage was done. Lisa didn't come home that night. I knew she wouldn't. Instead, I spent the evening savoring the quiet of the house, a bottle of bourbon in one hand and the divorce papers I'd prepared weeks ago in the other. For the first time in months, I felt in control. No more pretending, no more waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was finally the one pulling the strings. The phone calls started the next morning. Lisa tried first, frantic, tearful voicemails begging me to call her back, to talk, to let her explain. I deleted them without listening to the end. Then came the texts, "Please, Jack, it's not what it looks like," and "We can fix this, I know we can." I didn't reply. She'd had plenty of chances to explain before. Her silence then had said everything I needed to know. By the afternoon, her family started calling. Her sister, her mother, even her father, none of whom had ever been particularly fond of me, suddenly wanted to know my side of the story. I ignored them all. This wasn't their battle. When Lisa finally showed up at the house, it was nearly midnight. I was sitting in the living room, the divorce papers on the coffee table in front of me, when I heard her key in the lock. The door opened, and she stepped inside, her face pale and drawn. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in a single day. "Jack," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" I gestured to the chair opposite me. "Go ahead." She sat down, her hands clutching the edges of her coat. For a moment, she just stared at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. I made a mistake, a huge, stupid mistake. But I love you, Jack. I love you more than anything." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that made her flinch. "Love? Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a hell of a lot like betrayal." Her tears spilled over then, running down her cheeks in silent streams. "It wasn't supposed to mean anything," she said. "Nick, he was just. I don't even know what he was. A distraction, maybe. A mistake. A mistake." I repeated, my voice rising. "You don't trip and fall into an affair, Lisa. You made choices. Deliberate, calculated choices. Don't stand there and call them mistakes." She reached for me, her hand trembling, but I pulled away. "Jack, please," she begged. "We can work through this. We can go to counseling, start fresh. I'll do whatever it takes." I shook my head, my chest tight with a mix of anger and pain. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't something you just fix. You broke us, Lisa. You shattered everything we had, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life trying to piece it back together." I pushed the divorce papers across the table toward her. "Sign these," I said. "It's over." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might refuse. But then her shoulders slumped, and she let out a shaky breath. "Jack," she whispered, "please don't do this. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance." I stood, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "You had your chance, Lisa. You had 12 years of chances. And you threw them away." She broke down then, sobbing into her hands. I left her there, retreating to the bedroom and locking the door behind me. Her cries echoed through the house, but I forced myself to tune them out. I'd spent enough time suffering for her mistakes. Now, it was her turn. Over the next few days, Lisa moved out. She didn't put up a fight. She packed her things in silence, her face pale and drawn, and left without a word. I thought I'd feel triumphant watching her go, but all I felt was a hollow ache in my chest. The aftermath of the gala rippled through her professional life as well. Julia called me a few days later to fill me in. The board had called an emergency meeting to address the scandal, and Lisa was temporarily suspended, while they conducted an internal investigation. It was only a matter of time before she was let go. Nick, predictably, had vanished. According to Julia, he'd resigned from the company the day after the gala, citing personal reasons. I wasn't surprised. Men like Nick never stick around when things get messy. They thrive on secrecy, not accountability. As for me, I threw myself into work, trying to rebuild the life Lisa had nearly destroyed. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the house felt unbearably empty, when I found myself replaying old memories, wondering where it had all gone wrong. But those moments were fleeting. Each day, the weight on my chest grew a little lighter. I filed the divorce papers a week after Lisa moved out. She didn't contest them. The process was quick, efficient, and mercifully free of drama. By the time it was over, I felt like a man waking from a long nightmare. Lisa tried to contact me a few more times in the weeks that followed, leaving voicemails and sending letters. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My focus was on moving forward, on rebuilding the trust she'd shattered, not with her, but with myself. And so, life went on. Slowly, steadily, I began to find my footing again. The scars Lisa left would never fully fade, but they no longer defined me. I was Jack, a survivor, and I had my life back. That was all that mattered. Months passed, and life settled into an uneasy rhythm. The divorce was finalized, Lisa was out of my life, and I had thrown myself into rebuilding. Work became my solace. Late nights at the office, early mornings jogging through the park, anything to avoid the deafening quiet of an empty house. My friends called it moving on. I called it survival. But grief doesn't move in straight lines. It sneaks up on you when you least expect it, like an old wound that refuses to heal. On some nights, I still caught myself reaching for Lisa's side of the bed, forgetting for a split second that it was empty. Other nights, I'd see her face in my dreams, not the Lisa who betrayed me, but the woman I fell in love with all those years ago. The one who made me laugh until my stomach hurt and who held my hand when the world felt too big. I hated those dreams. It was on one of those quiet, aching nights that I got the call. I was at my desk, working through a backlog of invoices, when my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. "Hello. Jack." The voice on the other end was shaky, barely audible. It took me a moment to recognize it. Mrs. Miller. Lisa's mother. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Jack, it's Lisa. She's in the hospital. The words hit me like a freight train. I hadn't spoken to Lisa in months. She'd tried to reach out a few times after the divorce, but I'd ignored her calls, convinced that keeping my distance was the only way to heal. Now, hearing her name again, I felt a knot of panic tighten in my chest. What happened? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She had an accident, Mrs. Miller said, choking on the words. It's bad, Jack. The doctors, they don't think she'll make it. I froze, the phone slipping slightly in my hand. Where is she? I asked, already grabbing my keys. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. I found Lisa in the ICU, her pale figure surrounded by humming machines and blinking monitors. She looked so small, so fragile, a stark contrast to the vibrant, confident woman I'd known. Her blonde hair, once meticulously styled, was matted against her head. An oxygen mask covered her face, and her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. Her mother was sitting by the bed, clutching Lisa's hand. She looked up when I entered, her face lined with grief. She's been asking for you, she said softly. Please, Jack. Talk to her. I hesitated, my feet rooted to the spot. Part of me wanted to turn and walk away, to let the past stay buried. But another part, the part that still remembered the good times, the laughter, the love, kept me there. I stepped forward and took the seat next to Lisa. Her eyes fluttered open at the sound of the chair creaking. When she saw me, a weak smile curved her lips beneath the oxygen mask. Jack, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm here, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. I'm here. Her hand trembled as she reached for mine. I hesitated for a moment before taking it, the familiar warmth of her touch sending a jolt through me. I'm sorry, she murmured. For everything. Tears welled in my eyes, but I blinked them back. Lisa, don't. Save your strength. She shook her head slightly, her gaze locking onto mine. I need you to know. I never stopped loving you. The words cut through me like a knife. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her that love didn't excuse betrayal, that she'd destroyed everything we had. But looking at her now, so fragile and broken, all I felt was an overwhelming sadness. I loved you too, I said finally, my voice cracking. I still do. Her lips twitched into a faint smile, but her eyes were heavy with regret. If I could go back, I'd do it all differently. I nodded, unable to speak. The weight of her words hung in the air, mingling with the steady beeping of the heart monitor. We sat in silence for a while, her hand in mine, as the machines around us continued their relentless march. I wanted to believe that there was still time, that some miracle would save her. But deep down, I knew the truth. The nurse came in a few minutes later to check on her. She gave me a sympathetic look before turning to Lisa. You need to rest, she said gently. Lisa's grip on my hand tightened. Stay, she whispered. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. She closed her eyes, her breathing shallow and uneven. I stayed by her side long after the nurse left, watching the rise and fall of her chest, each breath a fragile thread tethering her to this world. And then, as dawn broke over the horizon, Lisa took one final, shuddering breath and went still. The monitors let out a long, piercing tone, and the room seemed to collapse in on itself. The nurse rushed in, followed by a doctor, but I already knew it was over. I sat there, holding her hand, as the world around me blurred into nothingness. In that moment, all the anger, all the bitterness, all the betrayal, it didn't matter. All that was left was the ache of loss, the weight of what could have been. Lisa was gone. And with her, a part of me went too.